All right, let's jump right in. We're going to go on a journey today, but not to some far-off place. Nope, we're going deep inside your own body. Because believe it or not, you're carrying around a secret history, a story that's been millions of years in the making. So, let's kick things off with a question that might sound a little weird. Have you ever really thought about your tailbone? I mean, why is it there? And what's the deal with wisdom teeth? Or getting goosebumps when you're cold or scared? You might think these are just random little quirks, but they're not. They're actually clues. Clues to a much, much bigger story.
Okay, so here's how we're going to approach this. For this first part, I want you to think of your body as a kind of living museum, or even better, a detective story. And all these weird features, they're the clues. But you know, with any good mystery, you can't solve it until you find the right key.
Yeah, that's really the heart of it. Your body is this incredible archive of evolutionary history. But all those clues we mentioned, the tailbone, the goosebumps, they're just gibberish without a way to decode them, a framework for how life actually changes over time. And for a long, long time, nobody had that key. Instead, two big ideas were battling it out to explain everything. And to understand that debate, we've got to talk about a certain, very, very tall animal.
And that brings us right to our tale of two theories. You've probably heard this example before, but it's a classic for a reason. The giraffe. How in the world did it get that ridiculously long neck? Well, turns out, the answer you get totally depends on which scientist you asked back in the day. So, in one corner, we've got Jean-Baptiste de Lamarck, a French naturalist, and in the other corner, a name you'll definitely recognize, Charles Darwin from England. We're talking two brilliant minds here, but they had two completely, fundamentally different ideas about how all of this works.
Lamarck was first to the punch. He put his theory out there way back in 1809. He called it the theory of inheritance of acquired characters. It sounds complicated, but the idea is actually pretty simple. He thought that if an animal worked hard at something during its life, say stretching its neck, it could pass that physical change on to its kids. It's kind of like use it or lose it, but for generations.
So according to Lamarck, here's how it went down with the giraffes. The original giraffes, short necks. But they kept stretching, right? Straining to reach those tasty high-up leaves. Over a lifetime of stretching, their necks got just a little bit longer. And, here's the key part of his theory, they passed that acquired longer neck onto their babies. Then that generation stretched a bit more, and so on, until, boom, you get the modern giraffe.
But then, decades later, Darwin comes along with a totally different take. A revolutionary idea, really. It's called natural selection. And Darwin said, hold on a second, the effort of one animal doesn't matter. The key isn't about striving for a longer neck, it's about variation that's already there. So in any group of giraffes, just by random chance, some are born with slightly longer necks, and some are born with slightly shorter necks. It's just a lottery.
Okay, so this is the absolute crucial difference. Let's break it down. Lamarck's idea? It's all about individual effort changing the body. Darwin's idea? It's about nature selecting from what's already there in the population. The environment doesn't cause giraffes to grow longer necks. No, it just favors the ones that by pure luck were born with them. Those giraffes get to eat more, they're healthier, they make more babies, and guess what? Those babies inherit the genes for longer necks. Darwin actually got this idea by looking at something super familiar: farmers. I mean, for centuries, people have been doing this themselves, right? They pick the wooliest sheep or the fastest horses to breed. Darwin just realized that nature was doing the exact same thing, just on a much, much grander timescale. So, the big question, who was right? Well, all the evidence from things like animal breeding was already pointing straight at Darwin, but the final nail in the coffin for Lamarck's theory was genetics. The discovery of DNA changed everything. It proved, once and for all, that traits are passed down through genes, and your life experiences, they don't change your genes. No matter how much you work out, you can't pass your gym muscles onto your kids. It just doesn't work that way. So, Darwin's natural selection, that was the key we'd been looking for. All right, so we've got our key. Now we can finally get back to the main event, this story we really came here to unlock, our own. Let's use this idea of natural selection to take a walk through our human family tree. So what you're looking at here are kind of the greatest hits of human evolution. And you'll notice it's not a straight line up. It's more like a messy, branching bush. We start way back with ancestors like Lucy, an Australopithecus, who was one of the first to walk on 2 feet. Then you see a big leap with Homo habilis, the handyman, called that because they were the first to really make and use stone tools. After them, Homo erectus, who harnessed fire. I mean, what a game changer that must have been. And this long, winding road eventually leads to our famous cousins, the Neanderthals, and then to us, Homo sapiens. Now, if you look at this whole lineage, one trend just jumps right out at you. Yeah, sure, our posture changed, we started walking upright. That's huge. But the most dramatic story is what was happening inside our heads. Literally. Over millions of years, the brain size in our ancestors just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And this little chart here puts some real numbers to that story. Check this out. Homo erectus had a brain around, say, 1,000 cubic centimeters. Now get this. Neanderthals, on average, actually had bigger brains than we do, around 1450 cc. Modern humans were about 1350 cc, but it's shaped a bit differently. And while you're looking, notice something else that's changing, the face. Our faces got flatter, we grew this prominent chin, and our teeth, well, they started shrinking. And yeah, let's talk about those shrinking teeth for a second, because that is a really cool puzzle. If you look at our primate cousins like chimpanzees or gorillas, big, sharp canine teeth are totally normal. They use them for threats, for fighting. So what gives? What happened to ours? Why did we lose our fangs? Well, believe it or not, scientists are still debating this. There's no single slam dunk answer. There are a few leading ideas, though. One is called female choice, the idea that females started preferring mates who were less aggressive, and smaller canines were a sign of that. Another one is all about tools. The thinking goes, as soon as our ancestors figured out how to use a rock or a sharp stick as a weapon, who needs big teeth for fighting anymore? The advantage was gone. And then there's this third, really fascinating idea, that we basically domesticated ourselves. We started selecting for more cooperative, less aggressive individuals to live in groups, and smaller canines just came along for the ride. Okay, so we have our key, natural selection. We've walked through our family tree. Now we can finally go back to where we started this whole thing. It's time to solve the mystery of your body's weird quirks. So there's a scientific name for these things, these evolutionary leftovers. They're called vestigial traits. You can think of them as anatomical ghosts. They're features that were super useful for our distant ancestors, but for us, not so much. They're just echoes from a very, very different past. All right, let's do a rapid-fire round and solve these mysteries. Your coccyx, your tailbone, that's what's left of the tail our primate ancestors used for balance while swinging through trees. Wisdom teeth, those were extra molars for grinding up tough, raw plants. But our diets got softer, our jaws got smaller, and now they're just trouble. Goosebumps, that's a reflex that used to puff up our ancestors' body hair. It would make them look bigger and scarier to a predator, or trap a little layer of warm air. And what about that crazy strong grip that babies have? That's a leftover reflex from when primate babies had to physically cling onto their mother's fur to not fall. But here's the thing, this story isn't just about ancient history. It's not over. The book of evolution is still being written page by page, and believe it or not, we are still one of the main characters. And we are finding new chapters to this story all the time. I mean, get this, just a few years ago in 2015, scientists found an entirely new species of ancient human relative, Homo naledi, tucked away in a cave in South Africa. It just goes to show you our family tree is way more complicated and way more interesting than we ever thought. New clues are literally being dug out of the ground as we speak. Which brings us to one last really big question. If evolution never stops, what does that mean for us right now? Are humans still evolving? Absolutely. Scientists talk about how modern medicine, like C-sections, might be changing the selective pressures on, say, the size of a woman's pelvis. Our diets, our lifestyles, they're all creating new evolutionary challenges. So yeah, we're definitely still evolving. The only question is, where are we going next?